I've always had a knack for touch. There's something about the connection between my hands and someone's body that feels right, like I'm making a difference in their lives. So, it was only natural that I became a massage therapist. My wife, Emily, wasn't too thrilled with my chosen career path. She worried that I would be working so closely with other women and that it might lead to temptation. But I assured her that I was committed to her and our marriage, and she eventually came around. Still, there were times when she couldn't help but let her insecurities get the best of her. She would ask me if any of my clients flirted with me or made advances, and I would tell her honestly that no one ever did. I was strictly professional. One day, Emily called me with an unusual request. She asked me to give her mother a massage. Apparently, my mother-in-law had been dealing with a lot of stress lately and was experiencing tension headaches as a result. I agreed to do it without hesitation. Despite the fact that Emily didn't always get along with her mom, I had a good relationship with her and wanted to help in any way that I could. A few days later, I found myself setting up my massage table in my mother-in-law's living room. The scent of lavender filled the air as soft instrumental music played in the background. I greeted my mother-in-law, whose name was Linda, with a warm smile before explaining what the process would entail. She seemed nervous but excited as she took off her robe and lay down on the table wearing only a towel. I began by placing my hands on Linda's back, trying to ease any tension or discomfort that she might be feeling. As I worked my way down her spine, she let out a contented sigh and told me how wonderful it felt. Over the next hour or so, I focused on the areas that needed the most attention, using my hands and forearms to knead and manipulate her muscles. Linda's soft moans of pleasure filled the room, letting me know that I was doing my job well. As I moved lower down her body, massaging her thighs and calves, I couldn't help but notice that the towel covering her was slowly slipping off. At first, I thought it was accidental, but as I continued to work on her legs, she made no effort to cover herself. I tried to ignore it and remain professional, but when I caught a glimpse of Linda's bare parts, I got kind of aroused. I scolded myself inwardly for having such thoughts and quickly redirected my focus back to the task at hand. But then Linda surprised me by lifting her hips slightly and allowing the towel to fall away completely. She lay there completely naked before me, her body flushed with desire. "I'm sorry," she said shyly. "I just couldn't help myself. You're so handsome and talented, it's hard not to be tempted." I froze for a moment, unsure of how to respond. The logical part of my brain was telling me that this was extremely inappropriate and that I needed to put a stop to it immediately. But then another part of me took over, the part that had been dormant for far too long. The part that craved excitement and adventure. The part that wanted nothing more than to give in to this forbidden desire. Without saying a word, I stepped out of my clothes. And I climbed onto the table next to Linda's supple body. Our eyes met for a brief moment before our lips crashed together in a passionate kiss. My hands roamed freely over her curves as we lost ourselves in each other's touch. I gave into the desire and made love to Linda. She gasped in surprise and pleasure, our bodies moving together in perfect rhythm. We just did it on that massage table, losing ourselves in the heat. Her moans of ecstasy filled my ears as I brought her to the edge again and again. Afterwards, we lay there side by side, catching our breath and basking in the afterglow of our forbidden encounter. "I'm sorry," Linda said softly. "I don't know what came over me." "Don't be sorry," I replied, my hand gently stroking her silky hair. "We both needed this." As I drove home later that day, a mix of emotions swirled inside me. Guilt for betraying my wife's trust battled against the euphoria of fulfilling a long-held fantasy. I knew that what I had done was wrong, there was no denying that fact. But in that moment, it felt so right. That evening, I sat down with Emily and confessed everything. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, watching the pain and betrayal flash across her beautiful face, but it was also necessary if we were going to move forward. To my surprise, Emily didn't fly into a rage or threaten to leave me on the spot like I thought she might. Instead, she listened quietly as tears welled up in her eyes, and when I was finished telling my story, she simply nodded. "I suspected something like this might be going on," she admitted softly. "But deep down, I always knew you would tell me the truth." We spent the rest of the night talking and crying and trying to figure out where we went from here. It wasn't an easy conversation by any means, but by the time we crawled into bed together, just like we always did, I felt a glimmer of hope. Over the next few months, Emily and I worked on repairing our relationship. We went to couples therapy, we talked openly and honestly with each other, and slowly but surely, we began to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. Linda played a surprising role in this healing process as well. At first, Emily was understandably angry with her mother for seducing me, but as time went on, she came to realize that I was just as much at fault as Linda was. One night, as Emily and I lay in bed together after making love, she surprised me by saying, "I think it's time for you to give my mom another massage." I looked at her in surprise. "Are you sure?" I asked cautiously. Emily nodded. "Yes. It might help us all move past this once and for all." A week later, I found myself setting up my massage table in Linda's living room once again. This time, however, the atmosphere was different. There was an underlying current of tension mixed with anticipation. I greeted Linda with a warm smile before explaining what the process would entail. She undressed slowly this time, more out of nervousness than anything else, and lay down on the table wearing only a towel. I started off with light touches and gentle strokes, testing the waters so to speak, before gradually working my way into deeper pressure. As a professional masseur, this is generally what happens, but let's not forget what happened last time. Once again, the towel slipped away from Linda's body, revealing her nakedness to me. This time there was no hesitation or shyness, she wanted me just as much as I wanted her. I climbed onto the table with her and began kissing every inch of her beautiful. I explored her, memorizing the feel of her skin and the taste of her desire. It was different this time, more intense, more desperate, as if we both knew that it might be our last chance to experience this forbidden pleasure. When we were spent, we lay there in each other's arms. We didn't speak, there was nothing left to say. This moment was ours and ours alone. As I drove home later that day, a mix of emotions swirled inside me once again. But this time, guilt was no longer one of them. I had come to accept that what Linda and I shared was something special, a connection that went beyond reason or explanation. From that day forward, Emily and I navigated our marriage with a newfound sense of honesty and openness. There were still challenges along the way, moments when doubt would creep in or old wounds would resurface, but together we faced them head-on. And every now and then, when the stars aligned just right, Linda would join us in bed for a night of passion and pleasure.